Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the February 24th, 2014 episode of Monday Roundup with voiceformen.com and streamformen.com. With us, I am Dean Esmay, managing editor and general creepy stalker weirdo from A Voice for Men. With us, as always, is Dr. Tara Palmatier of shrinkformen.com. Say hi, Dr. T.
Hello.
And also with us is the horrible rape apologist and rape culture spreader and general hater of women and little girls especially, publisher of A Voice for Men, Paul Elam. Say hi, Paul.
That is Mr. Rape Apologist to you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. So we have three stories we're sort of going to talk about. We were all just talking before the Hangout set started, and I'm supposed to say less. Thank you for those who've given me feedback on that. We are supposed to be talking about three things. I think we'll start with the fact that we got an email that's out there circulating in email. It's on Facebook and others. I'm just going to go ahead and read it. 2020 that would be ABC's 2020 is looking for male victims of abuse. The email being circulated says, I am a producer at ABC News 2020, and we are researching a story on heterosexual men who have experienced domestic violence. This is clearly an issue often overlooked by the media, but one we know can have equally devastating consequences for relationships and families. Generally speaking, I think it's fair to say many people don't even realize battered men exist, which is why we hope an in-depth report can shed light on this misunderstood experience. Ultimately, we are looking for a few brave individuals willing to come forward and discuss their experience. That's from Sean Dooley of 2020. He gives out his phone number as 212-456-6050 and sean.dooley@abc.com. Presumably he wants that distributed because it's gone out in multiple emails, appeared on Facebook, and quite a number of other places. So while I'm tempted to be a little snarky about this, I'm going to actually start by thanking ABC 2020 for actually asking. And I suspect it has a little bit to do with a petition that was circulated when ABC 2020 did a story on Paul Elam and A Voice for Men, and then pulled that story. Now, I think it's because they were poorly prepared for that story, and they were rather surprised by the backlash they got just for the one story that they printed where they got so many things wrong. Remember that one, Paul?
Oh yes, I seem to remember something about that. Now, listen, I gotta point something out. I'm getting in touch with my inner gender justice warrior this week, and I want to know why they're asking just about heterosexual men. What does ABC have against gay men? Why aren't they wanting to talk about gay men who are victims of domestic violence? This smells of patriarchy.
Now, somebody who quoted that out of context would probably think Paul's being serious there.
You know what? I gave up caring what that particular brand of person thinks a long time ago.
It just happens to be the case that I know, based on extensive research and speaking to professional researchers, gay male couples, gay female couples, and heterosexual couples. Who do you think has the lowest rate of domestic violence?
I know.
Who?
Well, I can tell you who has the most. It's lesbian couples. Women, same-sex couples have the highest incidence of partner violence because of patriarchy.
And gay men have the lowest rate. And heterosexual couples fall in the middle between them, which is very interesting. We also know that statistically, depending on how you count it, men are anywhere from a third to more than half, depending on how you want to look at it.
Is it possible, Dean, that the part of what attributes the fact that gay male couples have the lowest rate of domestic violence is that there is not a woman in the equation?
Oh. What do you think, Tara? I'm not touching that one.
I'll touch it. No, I won't.
Touch him!
Touch it. In case anybody's new to this.
No, seriously, I'm going to add this. I mean, if you look at the CDC research at non-reciprocal violence, one one-directional violence in relationships, 70% is found to be perpetrated by females. I don't think it's outlandish at all to assume that part of the reason that gay male couples have the lowest rate of domestic violence is because there isn't a woman there to slap somebody around.
Women do seem to feel entitled to start hitting more than men do. I guess we can get into how much of that is biology, how much of that is culture. I offer no opinion. But we even know that in heterosexual relationships, if there's any hitting at all, women start the hitting more often than men do. That doesn't mean they do more damage, but that's another question. It's a separate question.
Well, and it's in more, and I would love to see a formal survey of mental health professionals. I can't tell you how many men I've worked with who have been physically assaulted by their girlfriends or their wives or their ex-girlfriends or ex-wives who went to couples therapy. And in couples therapy said, she's assaulted me, she's slapped me, punched me, kicked me, bit me, thrown things at me. And the therapist, well, you need to be better at communicating your feelings without using violence. And it's just like, wait a minute, time out. If the female half of that couple had reported physical violence, do you think for a second these therapists would have said to the male perpetrator, you need to really work on using your words instead of your fists? Hell no. No, they'd be telling the woman, get out, get an attorney, get to a place of safety with your children. Violence is a deal breaker. And I hear from these guys, I mean, I'm working with them, and sometimes I get emails, and it's just like, maybe you didn't go to the emergency room as a result of the assault, but if you think for a moment that therapist would have sat there unfazed, without batting an eye, and not intervened in some way. Anyway, sorry, got off on a tangent.
Really a tangent. I saw the same thing for a long time, Tara, is that I would see clinicians tell people they were working with, if there was an indication of any violence whatsoever from the male, that all therapy, all other issues in the relationship, any addressing them had to stop immediately, and that they could talk about nothing else except his violence. And that often included not even being able to talk about what was actually leading to the violence to begin with. Not that I'm saying that it's an excuse for violence at all, but you can, I think, fairly well predict in a lot of people that there's going to be some violence if they're emotionally and psychologically abused year in and year out in a relationship. Everybody has a snapping point, and then what's happened in so many of those cases is that a clinician would be presented with a couple that had reached that snapping point. A guy had been abused to no end forever and ever. He finally let loose and snap, and then the message was, you're the problem.
Yep.
You're the only thing we're going to talk about. We're not talking about anything else. Absolute insanity in the counseling office, and they're still doing it today.
Exactly. Well, it's because they get cause and effect backwards, right? So it's, you hit her, you need to change, and they will not look at the years of emotional and physical violence that the woman perpetrated leading up to that. And they often will do the same thing when the man has had an extramarital affair. It's not, I was in a sexless marriage, starved for affection, not a kind word, emotionally beaten down, verbally battered. It's, okay, your marriage is in trouble because you had an affair, and will not look at anything else. And when guys do snap or they go outside of the marriage, essentially what they're doing is giving this particular type of woman a you can be as bad as you want, because now they have something, an actual transgression to hold over their heads for all of eternity, to make them pay, and to say, well, yeah, maybe I did kick you, but you had an affair, or you pushed me out of your way one night, and it's just a license to abuse carte blanche from that point on. and the man is never allowed to forget it. But it's rarely is it taken in context. And I'm not condoning, but cherry pickers out there, I'm not condoning violence in any way, shape, or form. So suck it.
Let the cherry pickers pick. They need something to eat, for fuck's sake.
I have a theory about this, and it's my theory that is mine, that I'm going to tell you now because it's my theory. I have a theory, which is my theory, which I will remember shortly because it is mine. The fact is that while what you report about clinicians is true, I keep hearing more and more and more from young social workers and psychologists who are predominantly female, who are very open-minded and talking at least generally favorably in the direction of what you're talking about, Tara. I have a theory, which is that the writing is on the wall for the feminist establishment, which for decades now has garnered billions of dollars on domestic violence. And the fact is that study after study after study after study, year after year after year, has accumulated, showing without doubt that the Duluth model is bullshit, that the patriarchal model of domestic violence is minuscule, that most domestic violence is reciprocal. Even if it's not entirely reciprocal, women are about as likely as men to be the sole aggressor, or when it starts, it's more likely to be the woman. Basically, that we're seeing acceptance that it's not a gendered problem, or to the extent that we can call it gendered, it expresses a little differently in women than men, but in the final analysis, the feminist model is bullshit. And what traditionalist conservatives tend to believe, it's bullshit. Women can be as violent as men can. I think the writing's on the wall. The establishment knows the writing is on the wall, and this may account for the sudden explosion of interest in the rape issue, because the research isn't so clear there, is it?
No, it's not. And I do want to point out again, and I know, and this is great for cherry pickers, I don't really care. Not only are we finding out that everything feminism has told us about domestic violence for the past 50 years is utter and complete bullshit, what we're looking at, and I don't, I'm not drawing necessarily a gendered conclusion out of it, but I'll point out again, in relationships that have two women, they tend to be the most violent. The next step down is a relationship that involves one man and one woman. And the next step down in incidents of violence is two men. I think that's worth exploring. I think that's at least worth taking a look at. And then you consider, like I said, as the CDC discovered, that in non-reciprocally violent relationships, of one-directional violence, 70% of the perpetrators are female. When we look at the incidence of physical child abuse, man, it's really stacked on the side of women being the perpetrators and males being the victims for the most part. I'm not saying this makes violence in the home or violence against children a gendered problem, but what I'm saying is that there is an ample enough valid evidence out there to maybe develop a hypothesis and start exploring that with more research. We may have a gendered problem with domestic violence leaning in the direction of women that has never been explored because, as we all know, women are not violent, and as a matter of fact, they're such a nonviolent class, they need to be able and have a moral commitment to kill any male who's abusing them. I don't know how she-he's stuff works out for the lesbian couples. I don't know if they're supposed to shoot each other or neither one of them's supposed to be shot. But I'm going to be
they're supposed to find a heterosexual man to blame, and then they can shoot him.
Well, they don't have to look very far for that in this world. But I'm wondering how 2020 is going to handle this. Well,
I hope they're not. I hope they're not letting Lizzie Vargas handle it, and God forbid they put these guys in a room alone with Jacqueline Friedman. And I haven't heard from 2020 yet, not that I would. I'm sure 2020 doesn't know who I am, although if they did a basic Google search for abused men, I think I'd appear somewhere on the first page of results. But given what happened with you, and just in your recounting, of course, nobody saw the interview, but some of the questions Elizabeth Vargas asked you, like, you really think women have an advantage in family court? I would have serious reservations about recommending that any man who's currently in an abusive situation and vulnerable go and be interviewed by this group. Because honestly, I mean, come on, it's television. It's not about bringing light to the problem. It's about exploiting these individuals' pain for ratings.
I'm going to take an opposite tack.
Okay.
And I am inclined to being more charitable than others. First off, Elizabeth Vargas may have gone to the rehab center when she realized she was drinking throughout that whole segment with Paul and was not ready to talk seriously to him. And she might come back and actually want to have some real questions. I've seen some things on 2020 that are pretty good and do appear to be responding to a petition that was circulated. I would actually like members of the Voice for Men community to be there because we have always cared about battered men, abused men. We've always written about it. We've always talked about it. We've always supported Dr. Tara with her work on shrinkformen.com to help men in abusive relationships. I don't know. Maybe it's taking a chance to ask somebody to go public with their story, but
here's the deal, though.
If there's any chance that they'll do it right, you could make a big positive difference for a lot of men who will see this.
I agree, Dean, but I got to tell you, I think the chances of them doing it right are pretty slim. Let me tell you what Tom Likas told me when I did his show. He went on with Elizabeth Vargas, only he really didn't go on with Elizabeth Vargas. What they did was put him in a room with a producer who asked him all these questions. And then they filmed Elizabeth Vargas asking the questions and spliced in Tom Likas's answers. He went to New York, never fucking met Elizabeth Vargas. And they basically concocted this interview. I got to tell you, without some sort, I mean, they retracted the lies, which is fine. That's a good step. That came from their legal department, not from their producers, who don't give a shit about the truth or shedding light on problems. But if the producers were willing to come out publicly and say, look, we did this thing on the manosphere, on AVFM, on Paul, whatever, we got it wrong. We did this wrong, and we're recognizing there's some unexplored problems, and we really want to apologize to the community for not being more forthcoming, and we want to correct this and do something, then I would have more of a tendency to believe there was something sincere going on. I still wouldn't believe it fully because these are, after all, network TV people. But to me, the chances they're going to come close to getting this right, and I hope you're watching this, ABC. I hope the producers of AB, I put 2020 in the title of this for a reason, and maybe if they're doing the research, they'll end up watching this. If you're going to do a show on male victims of domestic violence, start talking to some people that actually fucking know something about it, and quit.
Yeah, don't bring in a feminist pundit who's going to talk about the Duluth model and how women's violence is really the result of years of oppression and the patriarchy, because that's a load of hooey, okay? And for all of their, the last 30 years in billions and billions of dollars supporting the feminist governed domestic violence industry, well, first of all, I don't buy their stats. But for people who are supposed to be working on domestic violence yet have inflated numbers every year, they suck at what they do. If you want some actual peer-reviewed research on the matter that uses good scientific methodology and isn't yanked out of the Feminist Institute of Technology's out of my ass statistics, look at Murray Strauss's research. I forget the title. He did a study. Basically, since the 1970s, intimate partner violence against women and heterosexuals. Woo! Heterosexuals. It's a new term. Actually, feminists, you can use that one. We're heterosexuals. Because we suck.
You just found a term to replace cisgender. They'll love it.
Back to my point, which is that since the 1970s, intimate partner violence against women in heterosexual relationships has been on the decline, while violence against men in heterosexual relationships, both emotional and physical, has been on a steady rise. So.
And by the way, ABC, I don't want to hear any shit about it being fair and balanced to give an opposing point of view. ABC, you have been peddling feminist dogma and propaganda and bullshit for it as long as it is coming out. If you do a fair story, that is the beginning of balance. You don't need Amanda Marcotte or any of these other, or Jessica Valenti, or who was it you had, Anita Sarkeesian, for fuck's sake, a con artist up there as your other expert when you did a story on me. Get it right. Start looking at the damage that's being done to people. Look at Denise Hines' research on what happens to men that seek help when they're in trouble, when they're being violated physically and emotionally in relationships. Look at the way they're treated. Yes, go to Murray Strauss's research. Go to Richard Gell's research. Go to Suzanne Steinmetz. Go to Martin S. Feibert's research. Go to all these people that are actually doing work in this field, that have some real information for you, and cover the shit. And don't dilute it with a bunch of feminist propaganda so that you can appear balanced. You're not balanced, you never have been, and it's about time you started being balanced.
In fact, let me go ahead and interrupt and mention 3 names. I'll give you 3 names. Murray A. Strauss. Strauss has only 1 S in it. He's at the Family Research Lab at the University of New Hampshire, Durham. I was able to get him to do an interview with me. Why can't you, ABC News 2020? Martin S. Fiebert of the California State University at Long Beach. Google him up. I was able to interview Professor Fiebert 2020. Why weren't you? Don Dutton, University of British Columbia, Professor of Psychology. I was able to interview him. Why weren't you? I've done all of these people on...
Aaron Pitsey.
I've done all of these people...
Would be another good person to interview.
Who I do a bi-weekly radio show. I've interviewed all these people with Aaron Pitsey. Aaron Pitsey, somebody else you should do a story with. By the way, she appeared on your show 35 years ago. You might even be able to go get some archive footage from her on her. And she's not the only one. I regularly interview world-class, very well-known researchers in this area. Look me up. I'll hook you up with these people. I got their phone numbers and their email addresses, and they take my calls. I bet they'll take yours too. So there you go. I guess there's enough of that. I'm going to stick with my story, though. I believe the whole rape culture meme is gaining ground because feminists know they're losing on the domestic violence battle, and they need a new battle to fight. So they're going to make it about rape. In fact, Charles Clymer.
Well, but even that, I mean, it's gotten to the point where the word rape doesn't even hold the same emotional charge that it used to. People are like, oh, that show is rapey. I mean, rapey is now an adjective. They've little girls crying wolf one too many times. The same with misogyny. You know, it just doesn't pack the same punch. It doesn't. And if real rape victims aren't taken seriously, I think the people they should thank are the rape culture feminists.
Can we coin Wolfie and Accusey?
Sure. Like truthy. It's truthy. Accusey, rapey.
I'll tell you what, I think next week we may actually talk about the rape issue in more depth. I'm in the middle right now of writing a piece on Charles Clymer, who once debated Paul not very effectively.
Wait, was that the guy from HuffPo?
That's him.
Who tried to sound like John Kerry in the debate? Well, now, Paul, you're pulling my leg. You still owe me for sitting through that whole video. That was 90 minutes I will never get back.
He's made BuzzFeed and a whole bunch of other sites with some of the most whacked out rape statistics I have ever seen. I mean, seriously, a first-year statistics student should look at this and go, how did you get away with that? I mean, you were just going to get a big old F from a decent college math teacher, high school math teacher.
It's the feminist out of my ass Institute of Technology.
Well, I mean, he uses the multiplication and division operators properly. I'll give him that, but that's about all he can do. Maybe we'll talk about it more next week. Let's try and get this show back.
Not another show on Clymer.
No, we won't do it on him. Maybe we'll talk about rape and false rape in particular, because my God, what a mess. So, hi 2020. We are a resource for you here. Paul and Tara are worried, but I think if you're one of our people, you might want to take a chance, especially if you're feeling pretty strong and recovered from your experiences. You might be able to do some good by talking to those people. I'll hold on to that hope anyway. In another story that we kind of wanted to talk about, I saw a piece in the Wall Street Journal today that I could not decide if I was pleased or pissed off by it. The piece is entitled, "Are Schools Asking to Drug Kids for Better Test Scores?" And it's about a new book by a Stephen Hinshaw and a Richard Scheffler about the rise in medicating children. So that, and they're trying to blame it on standardized testing, because kids on Ritalin and things like that do better on standardized tests. What I think is, and it's nice that they're acknowledging that there's a possible problem here, but they even say, they still couch everything in general neutral terms. The only time they recognize there's a boy problem is they do say 1 in 5 American boys receives a diagnosis of ADHD. So 1 in 5 boys has a mental disorder and probably needs to be medicated for it. And we think the problem may be standardized testing.
No, I don't. Yeah,
any
other possible explanations?
I'll take this one.
Explanation. 4 out of 5 teachers in this culture have a mental disorder, and that is part of the problem.
Well, actually,
Go ahead.
I want to hear Dr. Tate.
First of all, I think there's definitely a correlation. I don't think they can claim cause and effect. I don't know if they are, but there does seem to be a correlation there. But I also think what has happened during that same time period over the last 30 years is that elementary school education and secondary education has become incredibly feminized. We have created a culture of fear that looks at any man who wants to work with children as possibly being rapey and pedophilia-y, and so many men won't enter the field now for fear that they're going to be painted as a potential child predator. So you have a bunch of women who are primarily in charge of education in this country, elementary and secondary, who perhaps are not very well equipped to manage children who might be a little more active than some, who expect the boys to sit there well-behaved like the little girls, and instead of actually, doing their jobs, they advocate putting young children on an amphetamine. And I also think, factored in, there's the rise of the single-parent household, particularly single moms who, their idea of discipline is yelling and screaming after their children ignore them for a period of time, who also probably find it easier to drug their kids than to actually parent them, or perhaps provide them with a father figure who can handle doing the discipline and providing structure and teaching the children logic and reason, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's a number of factors going on. I don't think it's solely a matter of schools who want to up their test scores drug their kids. I think there are several factors at play here, and that's it.
I think I find it sad that we don't acknowledge more often that it's overwhelmingly boys they give this diagnosis to. I'm convinced that it's overdiagnosed to a massive degree. I have seen what I would consider truly hyperactive children. They don't appear common to my eyes. I'm not a clinician. I met at least one little girl some years ago. It did happen to be a girl who, like, wow, yeah, that's a hyperactive child, period. You know, she's 8 years old and given to screaming fits and throwing herself against a wall for an hour because she's having a temper tantrum. All right, that's probably a child with a serious psychological issue that may even require medicating, maybe. 1 in 5, no. And it looks to me like a lot of it is probably what Christina Hoff Sommers wrote about in her book, The War on Boys. We do have a feminized education system. I've thought about this a lot recently. Your average boy or girl now grows up in a household without a father present or a stepfather present, and most stepfathers, I've been one, I don't hate stepfathers, but most stepfathers are not as effective as biological fathers, most of them. Some of them are golden and gifted, most aren't. They've grown up, but they've grown primarily raised by women without men really present, and then they go to school where they are primarily taught by women. In fact, after 40 years of feminism, the number of male teachers as a percentage and even in absolute numbers has gone down. There used to be more men teaching in K through 12 education than there are today. So you essentially have a whole generation of young boys and girls raised almost entirely by women. And you think there can't be a problem there, right? Because gender is a social construct. Is that what the thinking is? I think young children, and especially our young boys, are being very ill-treated by the education system. And jamming pills down their fucking throats is a big part of it. You may be doing lifelong brain damage to those boys. Have they ever even thought about that?
I think they're doing longitudinal studies now, and yeah, there are problems. You don't give a developing mind. Is amphetamine a Class B drug?
I don't remember.
I think it's Class B.
Yes, it's Schedule 2, and it is so, which makes it a prescribable drug, even though certainly the medical benefits are dubious at that age. Also, we know for sure that the prefrontal lobe development in kids that age it's going at an amazingly fast pace and continues up until they're 24 years old, which is why the drug has a severe impact on them at a young age. There's something else, what Tara was talking about a minute ago, and what I've seen going on in this system for a long time. I think this is a really, really destructive combination of the education system and our family courts. You have mothers ripping fathers away from children at 6, 7 years old, demonizing them, alienating the father, getting rid of him, really putting him out of the child's life. It's not just the absence of a male figure or a male mentor in their lives. It is the evisceration of their bond with their father. And then lo and behold, the little guys act out. Now, who would think that they would go to school and act out after something like this? And then you have teachers, predominantly female, who don't want to bother with any of the behavior.
Unless they want to date your young male son.
That's for middle school. I'm talking more elementary. But they act out their broken families, and rather than get them help, or rather than family courts recognizing what they're creating, what the family court and the single mother have created gets thrown into the school system where he acts out, and then of course nobody wants to bother with his behavior or figure out what's going on. And we're also talking about kids that are just normally male. They're just rambunctious, they're playful, they're more aggressive than girls, which is fine. It's normal for them. they don't want to mess with any of that. So they start shoving these psychotropic medications down their throats. Guaranteed they're doing damage. There is research going on right now. They've even tied, and there's more research happening on it, the incidence of liver cancer really going way up in these kids that are getting Ritalin and other other amphetamines when they're in an age where their brains can't handle that sort of thing. It's absolutely, you're looking at some of the worst Orwellian stuff in the world going on right under our nose right now. We're destroying kids with our courts, putting them in a school system that's going to literally finish them off. And then we wonder why we don't have so many young men even bothering to apply for college anymore, or that aren't making it through the educational system to the point that they can even apply to go to college. Absolutely insane. I'm not buying this book as about test scores, although I would not put that past a teachers union for a moment to use drugs to try to boost the test scores.
So they can keep their jobs.
Exactly.
You know what? I'll make my closing on my statement about this. 2 points to Doctors Henshaw and Scheffler for acknowledging that we may be over-medicating our kids, -10 for not really noticing how much of it is boys, and for thinking that standardized test scores all by itself would be the primary explanation.
Absolutely brain-dead analysis on their part.
I think so. Finally, we have the state of California, a state which often sets the legislative trends for the rest of the United States, which often winds up setting the trend for much of the rest of the world, appears to be trying to pass a bill, SB 967. I have had no chance to review this. Paul has. Tell us all about SB, which I take to be Senate Bill 967, Paul.
Well, it's just a wonderful piece of legislation, Dean. I think apparently there are politicians in the state of California who have decided that the Dear Colleague letter, which basically not only reduced the standard of evidence for sexual assault allegations on college campuses from clear and convincing evidence to preponderance of the evidence, but also made it so that young men would not have representation in their little star chambers that they've set up and called honor courts, and so that they would not be able to question the credibility of their witness or get any other artifact of what we normally have considered due process of law in this culture for a few hundred years. Well, now they want to make that, which was just a directive for funding qualification for state-supported institutions, now they want to make that law in California. And the most pernicious part of that is that not only does it follow all of the Dear Colleague guidelines for basically removing due process and putting the pursuit of a criminal accusation into the hands of university administrations, but it also sets up the standard so that if you're accused of sexual assault, that it is not enough that somebody did not say no. You have to prove that you got consent. And think about that for a moment. What the implications are that if you go out on a date and have a few beers, a few glasses of wine, and you end up back in a dorm room having sex, and you're accused later of that being a sexual assault, you have to prove your innocence. You have to prove that you were given clear verbal consent for the sex, when sex is almost never a product of clear verbal consent. It almost never, certainly not between married couples or people that live together. People in regular relationships don't sit down and have a verbal agreement that they're going to have sex. They just have it. And the same thing happens on college campuses between young people in hookup culture. What this is just absolutely incredible, and they are really serious about this. This is a bill up in the California legislature to make it so that the burden is placed on the accused to prove their innocence, something the total exact opposite of every notion of presumed innocence and due process we've ever had.
And I see that once again, they have not given it a name that anybody who's voting would recognize it for what it is. It sounds like a new type of drug that Pfizer is researching, or they might do like they did that with Prop 28, or they'll give it, they'll do something like creating something called the death panel, which the rape is bad bill. Do you want to vote for that? Oh yes, rape is bad, realizing that most people don't look too closely at these things, and essentially what they're asking people to do is to vote away their right to due process.
And I would be surprised if they do it. Dean, do you have the link to that up? We should get the name of the legislators out there, the legislators that are sponsoring.
California Senator Kevin De Leon, and Legislative Women's Caucus Chairwoman and Vice Chairwoman Assemblywoman Bonnie Lowenthal, and Senator Hannah Beth Jackson. All three of you are scumbags, and I wish to God you'd get voted out of office. But
with gerrymandering, that's probably not going to happen.
I know it's a horrible problem, but God, we could do a whole show on that. People would be thinking we're crazy. But yeah, these politicians frequently practically have jobs for life, especially because people don't vote in primaries, and they should. But that's another discussion. Yeah, those are the three people we're looking at: Senator Kevin De Leon, Senator Hannah Beth Jackson, and Assemblywoman Bonnie Lowenthal of the California Legislative Assembly are proposing this legislation seriously. I got to tell you honestly, when I was in my 30s, I'd never gotten a college degree. I finally decided to go back to college and get a degree. I got one, graduated with honors. Wish to hell I'd never done it. And my standing advice at this point for young men is don't go to college.
Well, here, let's add this. Listen, go to college online.
If you're going to go at all.
Yeah, but don't go mix it up with the population there at a school, especially now in California, but in a lot of other states too, where this is because when we see the University of Montana, after there was a 2-year period at Montana State where there were 2 allegations of sexual assault in 2 years at Montana State, and the media there turned that into coining the term for Montana State as the rape capital of the United States. This is the kind of insanity that we're dealing with right now, and they are putting it into law. So I want to say this to all you asshats out there that think that MRAs are screaming about just a bunch of ideologues with nutty ideas that really don't have any influence on the culture. Wake the fuck up. This is going to result in many, many young men losing their futures after they've invested in school, after they've worked their ass off through high school to get good grades so that they can qualify to go to a good university. All their ambitions, all their plans, all their ability to care for a family, for their future, is going to get washed away by a law that essentially says that we don't have constitutional rights anymore if you're accused of sexual assault.
A law that essentially empowers disordered, vindictive, fucked up women. Bravo.
And puts them at center stage and lets them have whatever they want.
It makes them judge, jury, and executioner. It does.
He didn't call me back. Rape.
Yep.
He slept with me and didn't make me his girlfriend, and I wanted to be the girlfriend of the captain of the basketball team. Rape.
If he can't prove that she said yes, like if he doesn't have a signed statement or a recording, because that's what we're talking about, his ability to prove her affirmative consent, then he can be found guilty and will be, and the law in California is going to say he must be found guilty.
Unless he has the encounter on videotape, which may or may not be against the law depending on what state he is to film somebody without their consent. Yeah.
Watch him go to jail, and they'll accuse him of sexually assaulting her because he taped without her consent.
Yep.
You can't go to school online, or find a real job that doesn't involve a bullshit degree anyway. Or
when the feminist fire god demands a human victim.
Yep.
It
if
doesn't
you have
matter.
to walk on that campus, walk right on and walk right off. But even then,
Yeah.
dude, guys, we talked about this. There was one guy in Michigan we covered recently who got accused of being raped and went to jail for a woman he had never met. Anybody who thinks that this is a trivial issue, and like Paul said, oh, just a few crazy nutjob ideologues. No. This is school administrators, government officials, legislators, Congress. I mean, just it's crazy out there, and it's getting crazier.
Who don't deserve to be in the positions of power and authority they have if they're going to go along with and defend the likes of Amanda Childress.
Amanda Childress, who I think I recall may have sexually assaulted me. I don't know. Did you? I may have to fill out that anonymous.
Report her immediately. Report them all. I tell you what, I'm gonna. There's a few legislators that are going to find their way onto that form as well. But I do want to say this. I have 2 words about why all this happens without much resistance. Charlie Sheen. And let me explain why. I don't want to turn this into a different story, but Charlie Sheen is about to marry his 4th former porn star and is refusing to get a prenup. He already pays $100,000 a month in child support. He has a track record of failed relationships with the women that he chooses. I don't know how the relationships don't work. They're such stable individuals.
Must be all that tiger's blood.
Well, I figured, God, you know, if a woman can pick up a folded dollar bill with a crack of her ass, she ought to be able to make a marriage work. But apparently that doesn't work too well sometimes. But Charlie Sheen, who is now worth, everybody should know, right now he's worth about $125 million. He's paying $100,000 a month in child support, and he's marrying a porn star without a prenup and wants to have more kids. Look, men, you know, and I do. I feel it. You know, it's so easy to point the finger at men and blame them, but God damn it, some common sense. This bill in California, if it passes, will pass because of a mentality like Charlie Sheen's. Like, no matter what it is, put the woman first. Don't worry about consequences. And if you get them, you end up paying them. Of course, it's not going to be me that goes, you know, loses my college career. It's going to happen to some other guy who doesn't have his game together like I do, or some other stupid mentality that you have. Please, guys, take a look at what's happening in your colleges. If you are going to college in California, or you're thinking about going to college in California, and you're not saying anything about this to anybody, you are part of the problem.
Yeah, have some guts, guys. I hate the phrase man up because I don't believe in it, but have some guts. Speak out. Stop just believing that women are these fragile, innocent creatures. The radical notion that women are human beings. Accept it, embrace it, and really realize that that means there's a lot of fucked up human beings out there, and at least half of them are women. So, we've been going a little over 50 minutes, so we're actually over time. We're about out of time here. We should probably make a brief mention of the men's conference in Detroit.
Yes, we should make a brief mention of the fact that tickets for the men's conference in Detroit will go on sale officially tomorrow evening. If you want first in line for the tickets, you can send an email to conference@avoiceformen.com. Do it this very day. We have had lots of pre-orders. We're selling a maximum of 300 tickets. I want to remind you that at this conference, we're going to have Aaron Pittsey. We're going to have Warren Farrell. We're going to have Barbara Kay. We're going to have Senator Ann Cools. We're going to have Karen Strawn. We're going to have Miles Groff. We're going to have Paul Nathanson. I'm even going to show up and have something to say. We're going to have the one and only Dr. Tara Palmatier there at the conference speaking, bringing enlightenment to people and saying things that crazy won't like. But hey, you know what? That's what she does. If I left anybody, oh, Carnell Smith is going to be with us talking about false allegations. Mike Buchanan is coming from the UK to speak with us about his political party there. Plus, we will be having a news conference with our news representatives from the United States, from Canada, from the United Kingdom, from India, and from Australia, and Dr. Greg Canning. This is going to be one hell of an event. We're going to have a blast. It's not just going to be a conference. It's also going to be a party of sorts. And
I want Eminem to perform. Try to get him. Dean, make it happen.
I will work on it. I am also working on making sure that 1 out of 3 women who attend are raped or beaten.
Hey, not without my say-so.
Oh, there's
damn
a
it.
quote miner's paradise. There's Charlie Sheen to talk too.
No. I expect a lot of women to be there. Hell, they're half the people speaking, which somebody will probably get pissed off about. But too bad.
Also, the next episode on the 6th of next month of Mainstream Media with myself and Tom Golden and Dr. Warren Farrell, we are going to be talking a lot more about the conference. We're going to be talking about the new release of his 21st anniversary edition of The Myth of Male Power, and we're going to be talking about the wage gap that they still insist exists.
The zombie statistic that won't die, as I call it.
And Saddam had WMDs.
That's right. And
okay, kids. Well,
and patriarchy.
I finally have something final to say.
Oh,
now that you're not going to ask me.
Wait.
It probably won't happen again. But it won't.
Thoughts?
I do. It won't be a rehash of anything I've said. It occurred to me in trying to help the good journalists over at ABC 2020. A good starting place for you regarding male victims of intimate partner violence on both shrinkformen.com and divoiceformen.com. This past October, we did a domestic violence awareness month awareness campaign titled In His Own Words. You will find for every day in October of 2013 tales of incredible psychological and sometimes physical carnage perpetrated by wives, girlfriends, and mothers upon their sons, boyfriends, and husbands. And not just by these monstrous women, but oftentimes the family court systems who enabled these monsters. So if you're looking for what a man in an abusive relationship suffers with an abusive mother or female partner, that might be a good place. These might be good articles for you to check out. Don't go to feminist researchers for it. If you want the pure, raw, emotional experience of what it's like being in this kind of relationship as a man, when if you call the cops because she beat you, you might be the one to get dragged away in handcuffs. When you have mountains of evidence showing what an unfit, volatile parent and partner your wife is, she walks away with primary custody. I think that's a good starting point. And if you're really nice to me, I have all of these men's email addresses, and maybe I will contact them for you.
Look at shrinkformen.com.
And A Voice for Men has these articles too.
We did. I had the honor of hitting publish on most of them.
I have to say one more thing. I have one more parting thought. I just have to point it out because I think it's so freaking ironic. ABC is doing outreach right now to try to talk to victims of domestic violence where the female is perpetrator and the male is the victim. You notice that we have a multi-billion-dollar domestic violence industry. Who did ABC come to? To the men's movement. You know why? Because they can't get anybody in the domestic violence industry to help them actually do this story. That tells me everything I need to know about what's going on in this culture.
And Brain Trust Wunderkinds at ABC, you also might want to contact the domestic abuse hotline for men and women. Jan Brown has been running that organization now for, is it 20 years? And it's the only service of its kind, horribly underfunded because the piggies at the trough of domestic violence funding for mostly organizations that help women exclusively, you know, there's not much funding left for male victims of abuse, but she and her team have been doing good work for a while now on I don't even think you can call it a shoestring budget.
It's a wing and a prayer budget. Yep, they've done some great work for years there. All right, so I'm going to repeat in case anybody missed it. In the month of October, just a few months ago, every single day we publish a unique story from a man who faced abuse from a woman or more than one woman. Every single day in October. That's 31 stories, 31 men, and that's only a fraction of Dr. Tara's client base alone. So, join us here next week for the next Monday Roundup, where I will probably be talking about Charles Clymer and his phony false rape statistics. They're terrible. Might even talk about the fact that he refuses to debate female MRAs. And I'm not sure what else we have, but I'm sure it'll be fun. Thanks, guys. Peace out.
Bye-bye.
Bye.